Welcome to Nikki Bostwick Unfiltered. Today's guest is Elina Fuhrman, who I'm so happy to have on today. And we're recording from a friend of ours' house who introduced us a little while ago. And I've had the pleasure of having Elina's beautiful soups. She is the founder of Soupelina, which is a soup cleanse. And she also is an author, and she has a beautiful book. It's right here, Soupelina Soup Cleanse. And we're going to be getting into all things healing today. I'm really excited because we just had a chance to chat a little bit earlier, and I found out a little bit about your background, and you were in, mainstream media world. You were covering the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So just to see what, where you were and where you are now, and you're a mother of two beautiful girls, 33 and 27.
30.
And 30? Oh yeah, I'm 33. 30 and 27, and you look the way you do. Like, you need to give us all the tips, but let's start. I can't wait. Let's start with just talking about like how you went from CNN to, I think, becoming a travel journalist. Then, so tell us.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that we finally made it happen.
I know.
And what a beautiful day today is. And I'm honored to be a part of this podcast. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Oh, gosh. Where to begin? It's a lot of different journeys for sure. So I joke that I had many chapters in my life, and especially with the book, right? There's chapters. And I did, even before mainstream media. It's interesting that now we have the name for media. It's called mainstream media and alternative, kind of like traditional medicine and alternative medicine, right? Even though it was never alternative. But I worked in the news and for a long time, and covered wars and international events, and loved it. Very, very, very much loved it. And I joke that I had the 007 syndrome, because going into a war zone was like adrenaline rush.
Really?
And I felt like so badass and, like on top of the world. And I always knew that I always loved travel, and transitioning to a travel journalist was a beautiful thing. And another joke that I used to make, that I swapped a sleeping bag in a war zone for a 5-star suite, at the Four Seasons, when I would go and cover all these beautiful destinations.
But were you, just sorry to interrupt, like, were you on TV, or were you writing as a journalist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did everything. So I did reporting, I did writing, and I did producing.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And at this time, were you, did you already have your kids? Like,
yes,
were
I did.
You were traveling as a young mother?
Yes.
Gosh, that's a big deal. I mean, today is the very first time I've ever left my kids overnight. Oh, wow. So to hear you say that, it's very inspiring. And I understand just like what, you went through to just be committed to your career.
Yeah.
But you loved it. My kids are 2.5 and 5.5.
Aww.
Yeah, so they're young. I just stopped nursing one. And so that's kind of why it took so long, just being nursing or pregnant or whatever.
Yeah.
But so when was the first time you left?
Oh gosh, I worked the entire time because I was so young when I had them.
Yeah, that's true. You were in your 20s.
Of me. Yeah. And I always brought them along, and when I had interviews, I would bring them along.
I love that.
Yeah. So they grew up,
but not to Iraq and Afghanistan.
No. But they grew up traveling with me. They grew up going to CNN parties with me. They grew up, coming to the newsroom and sitting at the anchor desk. They were just a part of what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really how it is.
Yeah.
As a mother with a career, I think that's important to share with other people, because I think this whole idea of, like, over the last few weeks, this idea of two things can be true at once keeps coming up for me. Yeah. And it's so expansive. You can be a mother, and you can be a loving, present mother, and you can have a career.
Absolutely.
It's not that it's easy, and that sometimes you feel the guilt and whatnot, but that is possible. And I think spreading that message is super important. So the fact that you've had all these different chapters as well is really cool, because I think that's the way it is these days.
For sure.
So, so you became a travel journalist.
Yeah. And that was really exciting, because I've always loved traveling since I was a little girl. I grew up actually in the former Soviet Union. I wasn't born in America. And I escaped in 1989 after the wall came down.
Wow.
And so since
with your family or
no, by myself.
Whoa.
I brought my family later. Yeah.
Was that the plan with your
No,
family? Or you were just
no.
like, I'm out?
No, I'm out. Yeah, that's what happened.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then they were like, okay.
Yeah. And then I
bring
brought
us-
my family after my first daughter was born.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so travel was something that was, I feel, in my blood. I was predestined to travel because when I was 7 years old, I remember, and in the Soviet Union, people were not allowed to travel. And internationally, we could travel within the country, but it was also very complicated and complex. And it was just, not many people would go many places. And I did a little bit, but I always yearned to travel, even though I didn't know much about any other country, but I always dreamed that I will be traveling the world.
Yeah.
And
so you manifested it.
I manifested it, even though I didn't even know the word
Yeah.
manifest.
But you dreamed it and you made it a reality. Oh my gosh.
And it was such an incredible privilege to be able to go to so many different places and write about them and meet incredible people because, I feel like the world is a very small place. Well, we all know this these days, right?
Yeah.
But, growing up, I thought that the world was enormous because we couldn't touch anybody else. And now it's so small. And I feel like the more you know about the world, the bigger your heart is and the more you connect with people because we're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing all the cultures and being around so many different traditions and everything, it's just a beautiful thing. And I love it. And it's always been in my blood. And so, so I was doing that and loving it, absolutely loving it. And then one day I felt a lump in my breast and went to the doctor and turned out that I had breast cancer.
Wow.
And that's when everything changed for me. My life came to a screeching halt and I didn't know what to do.
How old were you?
I just turned 40.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in Brazil right before my birthday and really loved a white party because it's such a Brazilian tradition. And I thought that I come back and that's going to be my birthday. My 40th birthday is going to be on the beach. I'm going to have all this beautiful food, have my friends, and everybody's going to be wearing white. It's going to be a white party. And instead of a white birthday party, I ended up, my present was the cancer diagnosis.
Oh my gosh.
So that's when everything changed.
And is that when your diet changed or were you always eating kind of this way?
I always felt that I ate healthy and I probably did, but I wasn't aware of what healthy actually was.
Yeah.
Which even now, it's very interesting now that I've spent 15 years. This month is my 15th cancerversary. Yeah. Yeah.
And you've learned obviously so much along the way. And we were talking about oxalates before. And I think it's interesting to talk about it in relation to what you're bringing forward. Because that's like the new thing right now where it's like, there's always something that's bad.
Always. And
I think it's interesting because when you start to, I think the importance we talked about of heating up your food, because I didn't mention this before, but when I got my Hashimoto's diagnoses, I was like super into raw food. And I know that like I was eating kale like it was my job. You know what I mean? And the cruciferous vegetables in general. And they didn't agree with me and my digestion wasn't really great. And when I switched to heating up my food and really having a more balanced and well-rounded diet, even though it was like organic and clean and whatever, just like the balance really helped me because, that's how I learned about food combining and all these things beforehand. And I thought I was implementing it all, but it was just to such an extreme. And I feel like someone may look at my lifestyle now and think it's an extreme too, but but to me, it feels just more balanced because I feel like, I don't know, sometimes you have to go to one extreme to kind of find your way.
That's very true.
But I love that you talk about, and I was just looking through like hyperbaric, bathing, just different rituals and different ways to connect with yourself. So tell us about that. And then, also just what did you do to get over your diagnosis?
Well, it definitely was a journey because my initial thought when I received the diagnosis was that I don't want to do anything. And it's very interesting because I go back to that day in my mind so many times and kind of like check in with myself. Why did I do that? What is it that was going on in my mind? What was I thinking about? And it's a whole other aspect of disease, right? Which is an emotional component of a disease. But I believe very strongly after all these years that cancer is a fork in the road.
Yeah.
That cancer is the universe giving you an opportunity to stay or to go.
Yeah.
And back then I didn't know that. But something inside of me was telling me that I can't do what I am being told to do, which is chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and drugs. And it just felt really invasive. And so I did go through the process where I had to go into therapy because I declined everything initially. Then I ended up getting a lumpectomy, which is just removal of the tumor. And then I started radiation, didn't finish it, and was really, the doctors were really insisting on chemotherapy because the cancer was very aggressive and I was so young, and did all kinds of tests that were showing that within 17 months, there was a possibility that cancer was going to be all over my body and that would be too late. And who knows if that's going to be the end. And there were a lot of scary things that were thrown at me.
And as a mother with young children.
Yeah, it was very, very scary. It's really scary because we believe that cancer is a death sentence, right? And because that's what everybody thinks. The minute they hear the word cancer, that's like, that's it. It's over, right? But, again, I don't always listen to my intuition, unfortunately, and I keep learning.
Yes.
But for some reason, that time I was very steadfast, and my internal voice was telling me, no, this is not the right way for you. This is not the right way for you. And it was really hard because I went as far as, I was declining, but there were so many times that the doctors were reaching out to me and telling me that I absolutely have to do this, that I broke down. And I went to the office, I remember, to sign this enormous amount of paperwork to do chemotherapy. It's like buying a house. It's a stack of papers that you have to sign, waivers, all kinds of things. And then I came home and I just couldn't go forward with this. Now, another thing that was happening alongside with this is I dove into research and I started reaching out to various specialists.
Because you're a journalist.
And because I'm a journalist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had my own cancer journey, right? My own assignment, and I was experimenting on myself. And so I reached out to one researcher who is a prominent cancer researcher, and he looked at all of my tests and all of my paperwork and blood tests and everything, and said, I can see why your medical team is telling you, proposing to do certain, therapies. But he said, we're all looking at the same pathology report. And I said, yeah, there's just one pathology report. And he goes, yeah, but that's just one person's opinion. I said, what do you mean it's one person's opinion? It's science, right? And he goes, yeah, but everybody interprets it in a different way. And I'm like, wait, what? Are you telling me that there might be a potentially different way to look at the same thing? He goes, of course, absolutely. And that was my first time that I had this major aha moment. I'm like, what?
Yeah, because then it's possible to have a miracle come in, or it's possible that it could be something else.
Yeah. So everybody's reading this piece of paper and going, this is what you need. And he goes, you need to retest your slides, your tissue. So I said, okay, where do I do that? And he goes, the best pathologist in the country. Who's that? So he gave me the name, and he was not in the hospital, university level pathologist. And I reached out to him, ended up FedExing him the slides from the hospital, and he tested them. And when we got on the phone afterwards, he said, okay, I looked over the behavior of your cancer cells, and I can see why you're hesitant, but I can also see why your medical team is telling you to do what they're telling you to do. And I said, okay, so what do I do? And he said, you have to change your life. And I said, excuse me, this big scientist that I've been dying to hear his opinion, that's what he tells me. I said, what do you mean? And he goes, I don't know anything about you. I just know how old you are. I know your name, and I know how your cells behave. And that's all I know. And I know that if you keep doing whatever you're doing, you're not going to live.
But it wasn't like he was into raw food or anything or whatever. No. He was just saying, don't do what you're doing.
Just change your life.
And that's all he said.
That's all he said. And we talked about cancer and we talked about research. We had a conversation, but I was just like,
my gosh,
stunned.
So powerful.
I hung up the phone and I stared at the wall and, pardon my French, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? I didn't know. I really didn't know. And so I was dumbfounded and I had to sit with myself. Oh, I still sit with myself.
Yeah.
There are still days that I go, what do I do? And to figure out, what am I supposed to do? But the first thing that I did do is I called my oncologist and I said that I'm not going to do chemotherapy. And I thought that she was going to put up a fight because they pressured me enormously to do this. But she said, okay.
Wow.
And I was really stunned. And I guess because I was firm and I was
Yeah.
sure, like I was not wavering at this point.
Yes.
I said, I'm not doing it. And so then I realized that now I need to do whatever he meant by change your life and understand what that means. And so my first stop on that journey was I was mega stressed because I've worked in the news and, I had a family and there was so much always going on. And, I was a very different person. And admitting to myself that I was stressed, because if somebody would have asked me, are you stressed? I'd say, no, I'm fine. Absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step was understanding meditation. And as somebody who's a AAA personality, I don't just like dabble into something. I have to master it immediately, right? So what do? I find a monk. I don't just go to a class, I find a monk.
Yeah.
So I forged this connection with this monk. And we meet every weekend and we take a lap at UCLA at the football field. And he tells me the wisdom. And then we go to this little house that he had a meditating group. And there's maybe a handful of people, very few people, under 6 people every time. And he reads a passage from Vedanta and then everybody meditates. And I sit and open my eyes. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. There's no instructions. He doesn't tell you how to do. He just philosophizes, right? And I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I was participating. I was dabbling in and leaning in. So that was my first step. And then I was introduced to a Chinese medicine doctor and went to see him. And he took my pulse and he looked at my tongue and he looked me in the eyes and he said, your cancer is not physical. He said, it's going to be a long road, but we will get there.
Wow.
And I had no clue what he was talking about at all. I'm like, okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
And so besides acupuncture, he was a 38th generation herbalist. And so every time after the acupuncture, which he would play meditating music and he would tell me to meditate and he would tell me to do Tai Chi and Qigong and, all of these modalities that I've never even heard words for. And then after each acupuncture session, he would give me different herbs. And every time it was different. Sometimes he would literally hand me a tree in a paper bag. And he says, okay, when you get home, you put it in a glass pot and you boil it in this pot for this many minutes. And then you cool it off. And then another time it would be something crushed. Another time it would be a root. And, we're, used to all these little, pills, right? And capsules, right? And he's just giving me plants, and I'm coming home with all these twigs, and I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm just playing along. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so then I was asked if I know of Ayurveda. And up until then, as a travel journalist, I knew Ayurveda because of the spa. Love spa, like Ayurvedic spa treatments, amazing, right? Yeah. And they're like, no, as the medicine. No, I don't know anything about it. So I started dabbling into Ayurveda, ended up going to India and going down to Kerala, the birthplace of Ayurveda, and really just diving in like what it's about. And then somebody said, have you ever worked with a naturopath? And no, I don't know anything about that. Okay, so I was introduced to this naturopath in Atlanta. I flew to Atlanta, which I used to live there anyway, and spent a week there and learned more about that. And so all along, as I was going, meeting, and participating in all these different treatments, I was recording everything as a journalist, right? Just, also for myself, because working as a journalist, I realized that when you speak with somebody and you're in the moment, right? So you hear certain things and certain things just kind of go by. But then when you watch it or listen to it later, you hear things that you didn't hear when you were in the moment, right? And so I always wanted to preserve that and see what did I miss when I was in the moment. So I was transcribing all of my tapes, and I had an aha moment how all these ancient medicines, like Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and naturopathy, they all existed in their own realm. And they are a very important part of healing, and each medicine has its own principles, how they heal, and for centuries, we've relied on that, right? So modern medicine is like 100 years old.
Yeah.
Just literally 100 years old.
So new.
Right? And yet we cling to it and believe that this is the Holy Grail. But in reality, all of those medicines have wisdom and have roots. So I had this aha moment how all three of them exist in their own realm, and they need to be brought together in one way somehow. So along the side, I was playing with my diet because that was one of the things that kept coming up. And so I started with macrobiotic and was very, was interested in that, but then quickly realized that it's really not conducive in the climate that we're in, and it was not going to work. Then I tried raw, and it made me very cold, and it made me unhealthy, really, because I remember the first time I did a raw cleanse, it was April in LA, which is pretty warm.
Yeah.
We are very lucky here. And I was wearing a parka, a cashmere hat, a cashmere scarf, Ugg boots, and I was freezing. I was shivering. And I'm like, this cannot be good. Clearly something is not working. And so then as I was learning along these medicines, the common factor for all of them was soup. All the ancient medicines relied on soup to heal. So I started playing with soups. And also I also went vegan and seeing how at that time, this was 2009, vegan restaurants were not the norm. And there were so few places that you can eat vegan. And most of that vegan food was rice and maybe some steamed veggies and maybe like a seitan or tofu. And it was very uninspiring and not very tasty. And I joked that if I'm not going to die of cancer, I'm definitely going to die of depression because I cannot eat like this. I really struggled with food. And so I started playing in the kitchen, and soups were the only food that I can bring a lot of spices in, a lot of herbs in, and bring all of these things that through Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and naturopathy that had all these amazing benefits. And I didn't need to sprinkle. I can put quantities, like massive quantities in that. Pardon me. And that's how I started. That's how I started cooking soups. And eventually, it became the norm. I was coming up with all these different recipes, and then 2 years after my diagnosis, I went to see my oncologist, and she says, "You're cured." And I said, "Wait, aren't you supposed to wait 5 years before saying this?" And she goes, "Yeah, but your labs are off the charts, and you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing."
Wow.
So yeah, it was incredible. It truly was. I still when I think about it, I get teary eyed because it was so teary-eyed. Yeah.
Because you trusted yourself.
Yeah.
Someone told you. I mean, that pathologist.
Yeah.
Like telling you to just change your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you made it happen.
Right.
And you decided to interpret it the way it worked for you.
Right.
And I mean, now I just knowing from Terena, which is our mutual friend, that, you're putting on this event in Bali and you're still just very active in bringing people this medicine in a way. Meditation obviously has had a really big impact on your life.
Big impact. Yeah. Big impact. Yeah. Meditation really helps me understand what's happening within. And it is, I like joking, right? So I say that it's the most eye-opening experience you can get with your eyes closed because we spend most of our lives, distracted by what's around us. And actually having as much opportunity as you can to sit with your eyes closed and looking within is a gift. Is a true gift.
Especially now with screens, like the second we go to bed, the second we wake up, just anytime we are working, I think working remotely is really nice, but then at the same time, that means more time on the screen and less time face to face with someone in person. So it definitely has an effect on us, and being able to counteract that with all the things that you've done is beautiful. So how did you make Soupelina into a business?
Okay.
And how can people order it?
Okay.
Like where can, what region, I guess?
Okay. So Soupelina was never in the plan, you know? So what happened was I kept cooking, and for myself, obviously. And one year, so along with my plan to change my life, I started looking at my life as a whole, right? And part of our lives are relationships. And I realized that my marriage was not healthy, even though before I was diagnosed with cancer, I thought that I was doing great, but I was not as in touch with myself. And as hard as I tried to make it work, it didn't. And it fell apart after 23 years. And it was a big shock for me. And coming out of a marriage where my entire identity was tied to being a wife and a mother and having that unit was another major, major, major shock. And also financially, it was very crippling.
Yeah.
And at the first Christmas when I was on my own with my two daughters, I realized that I was not in the position to buy the gifts that I was buying before, and I didn't know what to do. And so I decided to invite people over for dinners and host people and make the beautiful food and do that instead. And so I blocked out a week, and every day I had different people that I would invite for small dinners. And I would always serve soup as the first course, and I would have multiple courses. And everybody was raving about soup. And one of the guests happened to be a publicist, and she said, "What are you doing with these soup? You have to sell them." And I said, "That's very sweet of you." And she says, "You totally have to sell them." And I said, "I know nothing about selling. I'm a journalist. I know how to write, but I definitely don't know how to sell." And my older daughter joked and like, "Mom, look at Uber people. They're not taxi drivers and they're doing quite well." So, you know, so she said, "I'll tell everybody. I'll tell my clients, and you should do that." So my daughters, they said, "Mom, you should totally do this. You should totally start a business." And I'm like, no, I don't know how to do that, you know? And so the girls were the ones who made a t-shirt for me for New Year's. And my friend came up with the name Soupelina, which is Soup and Elina.
Yes.
And the girls got me a ladle and engraved Soupelina on it. And they said, "Mom, you have no choice. You're doing this." And so at first it started as just friends, basically. And then Guild Group called me and said, "We want to do a cleanse with you."
Wow.
And I'm like, "How do you know? How do you know about my soup?" Who told you?
So you sold it online or with them?
At that point, I was just selling to friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then when Guild Group called you, how did you do it?
So the Guild Group put it on their site.
Whoa.
Yeah. And we did like a flash sale, and it sold out. And then they came back and they said, "Let's do it again." And so they did it several times. And I think it was the fourth time they did it over New Year's. And
that was at the time where it was like the height of, I think, what they were doing.
This was 2012.
Yeah.
At that time.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
At the time, I feel like.
Yeah. They were like hot. Guild Group was hot. Yeah. They were doing these flash sales. Yeah. And so, they did the sale over Christmas, but nobody wants to cleanse at Christmas. So they decided to extend it to New Year's. And I remember I woke up that year, and after New Year's break, I was also actually at Trina's that morning.
And were you at this point cancer-free?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I open up my phone, look at my email, and I have 200 some messages. There were a bunch of them from press and a bunch of orders. And I'm like, did everybody just wake up on the first day of New Year's and said, "I want a soup"? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And I was at Trina's, and she didn't have good cell coverage where she lived. And I remember coming out of the car, and I'm looking at my phone, was like blowing up. And there was a tweet from Good Morning America. And they said, "We tried calling you and you're not picking up. We're reaching out to you."
Whoa.
And I called, and they said, "We want to do a story about you." I'm like, "What?" And so that's when things really started.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And that's how a book came about, because Good Morning America did a segment, and they sent their reporter and did an interview, and it was on Good Morning America the next day. And my teeny little website crashed because it couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
But I got a lot of emails, and several emails from different agents saying, would you like to write a book? And I thought it was a joke, because also as a journalist, like, I'm not going to write on spec. Yeah. I know what it takes to write a book. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested in writing a book. And so one of the agents said that she was very, very interested, and that insisted and persisted. And I ended up meeting with her partner, who flew to LA, and we put together a very, very brief proposal outline, and I had a publisher within a week, and I still was like, that's not real.
I mean, what better person to pitch this book to? Not just someone who is knowledgeable, has gone through your story, but also you're a journalist. Yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you published a book, came out.
Then the book came out, and just everything just kind of happened, and it was really quick and really overwhelming and wonderful and exciting. And yet I was going, what is happening? Like, I wasn't really planning on doing this. Like, I'm a journalist. Like, I didn't plan on doing this. Like, that's not really what I do. And it's kind of learning to quiet that imposter. Now there is a word for that, right? Because I didn't train for this, but yet I know. And also, another component is spirituality, big component. Yeah. And I became very spiritual, and I've really dove into all of these different modalities. And obviously meditation is such a conduit to it. And I've explored the past lives, and I've explored all these different spiritual practices, and really believe that that I know in my heart that that's what I'm here to do, because I feel the vegetables, and I feel the plants, and I know what goes with what, not because I know with my head, but because I feel them.
Yeah. And it feels right.
Yeah. And it feels right.
And also, I love your story so much, because I've interviewed a lot of people, and I feel like sometimes over the last year, I've noticed too, it just keeps coming up that within the seed of hardship is this beautiful opportunity. Yeah. And you went through it, and you came out the other side, and how beautiful and how graceful you went through that. Yeah. And like you said, it's a fork in the road. You can decide. And obviously not to say that someone who did have cancer and they didn't battle it was their fault or anything like that. Yeah. People do have a time that they're meant to go, but to go through that and to come out this other side, and what a beautiful experience for your daughters too, and just everything. It's so wonderful. And I love that. Yeah. I love your story. Thank you. Just getting to know you. I've heard so much about you, not just through Terena, but Loren, and so many people that are down south in Laguna, they know you, and I understand why they're just like obsessed. It felt like I was like, I need to meet her. Aww. And I can see it.
They love
and I can
too.
feel it.
I heard a lot about you as well.
And I can feel it. And it's just so special to have heard your story. So tell us before you go, like, how can people contact you? Who can buy your soup? Okay. Because I know, I mean, I understand the logistics must be really complicated.
Well, it is, it's been challenging because, it's custom, right? Yeah. So, my purpose and my mission is to help people heal, right? And I believe that we heal, it's up to us to heal. I can't heal somebody. I can help somebody, and I can give them the roadmap, how to heal, but they have to do the work. Mm-hmm. And, but when it comes to soup, when people come to me, and I know what it is they want to accomplish with it, I can give them the tools in the soup how to do that. And so therefore, it's a one-off thing. It's kind of like, private, special, medicine. And so they can order a cleanse specific to what it is they're trying to achieve. Wow. But what I'm actually super excited about, because for years I've been trying to figure out, how do I scale to share it with more people? Mm-hmm. Because of the nature of it, it's like compounding medicine basically with whole foods, which is exactly what I do, and with herbs and the spices. And And at this moment, the way our food system is, I have not been able to come up with a way to do this on a bigger scale that would preserve the integrity of the product and medicinal properties of the soup for people who need it, right? So what I decided to do is, which is what I'm working on right now and is going to be coming out soon, is doing the gut reset class that people are going to be either going to do it on their own with all the tools or guided by me, or they can buy the whole thing basically. But all of this is housed on soupelina.com. Very easy. And
can someone in New York order your soup though?
I don't ship.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Which is why this course is so important.
Yeah. So if they want and they're local, they can take the course and they can come pick up the soup.
Yeah.
But if they're not, I mean, do you know Marta from Surya Spa?
Yes, Marta is my book.
Oh, she's
in my book.
Okay, makes sense. I love her so much.
She's lovely. I love her.
And she's kind of trying to do something similar that you're saying, because she was like, not everyone can come have an experience at the spa and get the cleanse and all that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think it's a brilliant model. I love it so much. And then you're educating them and you're giving them the dignity of the process of doing it their way, but understanding all the details. And you brought up oxalates earlier and how different foods become the catalyst for
villains also, because every year there's a new food group, right? And we love vilifying food groups. But the reality is there's nothing wrong with kale. Just like there's nothing wrong with potatoes, just like there's nothing wrong with rice. It's not the rice and potatoes and the kale and spinach and whatever else is coming up down the pipeline, right? It's how the food is grown, how the food is harvested, how the food is treated, how we consume it. What do we consume it with? There are so many ways to go around it, but we like to just say, this is bad, this is good. But it's not that simple. It's much
really
more complex than that.
And the emotional aspect.
Which and also, whatever Mother Earth gives us, we need that.
I know.
So we can't just say that it's bad. It's not bad. Just like all of our organs, we have them for a reason, right? We have those plants for a reason.
Yes.
We can't just discount that.
Okay, one last question before, and it's like kind of a deep-heated question for our last one, but I'm just gonna throw it out there because my parents immigrated here from Iran, and I feel like we're very aligned, most likely given our friend group, just politically and just, all the things. I think that eating this way and doing these things kind of opens you up to all perspectives.
For sure.
So given that you grew up in the Soviet Union and escaped and then brought your family here, I feel like you probably see the pros and cons of like a totalitarian, not pros and cons, not that there's any pros, but the fact that all the issues with the totalitarian government and having all this control. I'm assuming Soviet Union, no one was armed. Like there's, in the Iran, again, no one's armed. And I think it's interesting because me in my personal life, like I don't own a gun. I don't like guns. But I have a lot of friends who really deeply care about the Second Amendment. And I'm realizing how important the Second Amendment is. I would never want an unarmed country, especially because of just when people have gone through what you've gone through or what my parents have gone through, you understand the importance of people having the opportunity to fight back if need be. So it's not just about the Second Amendment. I'm curious about your thoughts because I know Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Putin.
Oh, that one.
Too. Like just all the things, just how you view all the things, because I feel like you're just such a balanced woman. And a lot of people right now in this country, there's just so much extremism. It's like cancel culture, extremism. Oh, she thinks this, so then she must be labeled left or she must be labeled right. And right now it's beautiful because I think a lot of people are coming together and are open to discussion, are open to hearing someone's just personal story. We were talking about anecdotal evidence before. I think there's a time and a place to listen to someone's lived experience. And so I'm just curious your experience about, because to me, like, I didn't know who Tucker was, but people who were on the left like hated him. And then there's a lot of people just coming in the middle and seeing someone for who he is. But like, I'm curious what you thought about that.
Wow, that's a big
question. I know, it's a lot of different things.
We can spend days discussing this question. So that's definitely not a quick close question. That's funny. Well, how do I answer it in a quick way? I think, well, the biggest thing for me when it comes to the health of a society,
Yeah.
right? It comes from within of each of person. Because when you are healed within, you have love. That's all you have. You can't hate, you can't barrage somebody or bully somebody or call somebody names, because you feel so much love inside your heart. You don't see bad in others, right?
Yeah, the triggering is like way toned
the bad
down. Yeah.
comes from within, because when you are unbalanced and you have something within you that is unbalanced, that's what's triggering you. Because when you see beauty, it's the beauty within. When you see bad, it's the bad within, because that's what triggers you. What triggers you is not another person. What triggers you is you.
And that's why it's triggering. That's
right.
what
That's why it's
called.
triggering, because you see something that you don't like about yourself.
Yeah.
And it's staring at you. And that's what triggers you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful way of looking at it.
And I think that healing yourself within yourself is the first step to making our world a beautiful place, because you can't go any further. You know, I really, it might be too utopian, but I really don't think that people will be killing other people or hating on other people if they have deep love for themselves.
Yeah.
And deep healing.
I love that.
Yeah.
What a beautiful way to end it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.